if I'm a GM of an NFL franchise today, I think I'm taking the Raiders roster over the Steelers roster and everything that comes with it. That's just me. I think that if you pull NFL GMs, more of them are going to agree with that take than you think.
Fernando might win a press conference, but he's not going to win a game. Steelers. The Steelers are going to win the division, and the Raiders are going to be picking in the top 10 next year. Welcome back to episode 5 of Out of Town Yinzers. I'm Joe alongside Justin. We're talking Steelers, Pirates, Pens, Pitt. We'll be here every week, every Wednesday, talking the Pittsburgh sports teams. Justin, what we're talking about today?
Get the rundown. I think we have a great show, and I'm really excited about this show. Just to start, Steelers like we normally do. We're going to fix Pro Bowl and Super Bowl week, and then we're going to rank the roster. Surely we won't have anything to disagree with there. Right into Pirates, we'll go over the McCutchen back and forth with Charrington. Ends, we go over the hot streak. Then we're going to touch on the 16 Cup with the anniversary being celebrated. And finally, like Joe mentioned, jump right into Kyle Lewis and the Senior Bowl kind of in general.
All right, so first up, like we have been, is the Steelers. Even though it's the off season, it feels like the time for the Steelers. But that press conference that happened last week with Mike McCarthy, can we say iconic this early when it comes to Mike McCarthy? I mean, he's a Pittsburgh guy. I'm going to throw a graphic up on the screen and talk through it today, but he had a press conference last week. First comments, I think it was right off the top of the press conference, was, you put on new team colors and it takes a minute to feel comfortable in team colors. That's not the case with the Steelers. Blessed beyond any measure to wear the colors you wore home from Mercy Hospital. And that's when he choked up himself. He went on to say, it means the world to me because Pittsburgh is my world. How can we not be all on board with Mike McCarthy? I was trying to lead the train. I think people are going to jump on board because this guy is someone we should be rooting for.
As we get closer to the season, people will start convincing themselves. Now, I'm clearly again, we've had a ton to say about McCarthy, which is just hilarious, the roller coaster we've been on with McCarthy since the first words of the pod. But you can't watch that press conference and not get excited. If you're from Pittsburgh, if you're a Steelers fan, I am the anti-McCarthy guy on the pod, clearly. And I was listening to the Dan Patrick show that morning. And they had like a Yinzer bingo that they were going, oh, he's going to talk about this. They're kind of making fun of him. It was pretty good, honestly. But I was listening to him. I was thinking through it. I'm like, if he, going over these things, I'm like, he's going to get like, if he's genuine and he truly believes the stuff he was saying and that was being, reported in the media, I thought to myself, I could see him getting kind of choked up, about this. And I watched it and I was like, I'm all in. I'm ready to run through a wall. Like, it's impossible to be not just a Steeler, but especially like if you have like the Pittsburgh roots and everything. You can't watch that and not be like, I want this guy to, I'm excited again because there is something. No, don't get me wrong. First time he makes a wrong call on a third or fourth down, we're gonna have the same opinions we would otherwise. That being said, you can't watch that press conference and not be like, truly have something to, which kind of felt like it was getting stale with that. I'm excited for the Steelers again. I am truly, after hearing that press conference, I am excited. Again, we've talked about my thoughts in general on the hire. We're over that at this point. I'm excited. I want to see where this goes. You can't watch that press conference and not feel something. Is really my take.
If you know anything about Pittsburgh sports, it's that we live on a roller coaster. We experience the highest of highs and we live with them, and then we ride the roller coaster all the way down to the lows. And I think that's how seasons go. That's how years go. The Steelers, though, with Mike McCarthy, is a high right now after the press conference. Patrick Graham as a defensive coordinator hire, kind of brings you back to earth maybe a little bit. But otherwise, I think still a lot to be excited about. But you said before off the top that you had a way to fix the Pro Bowl / week between the Super Bowl. I think the fix is literally just to make it an email. So what's your fix?
So I'll beat you halfway on that. I think who's watching the Pro Bowl at this point? Let me walk that back. How are we not excited about Shedeur Sanders and Joe Flacco on the same roster at this point? If you would have told your Browns fans, hey, Joe Flacco and Shedeur Sanders are going to be Pro Bowlers at the end of the season. If you tell them before the season, they have to be excited about this year, right? Not only the Browns have 2 Pro Bowlers, I think they're saying Joe Burrow and Flacco are both on the roster. So that says everything.
That's true.
Everything you need to know about the Pro Bowl, where we're at. I just saw that Justin Fields turned down the Pro Bowl before it even got to Shedeur.
Be a great flag football player, though. So
He would be. That's
if you're
true.
drafting to win that game, which is a flag football game, I think there's nothing wrong with picking Justin Fields as QB1.
That's actually true. That is actually. So my idea, I think this is a no-brainer. The NFL is incredible at marketing. I can't believe they haven't gone to this already, but you're telling me you hold a draft lottery in this week. You're telling me that there's not a ton. Are you telling me you're not watching that? There's no way. That's a marquee event.
Like how the NHL does it, where there's a lottery.
Yeah. So I think they could. I think, again, the NFL is so much better than the NHL at marketing. This week just feels flat to me, and that's a huge event. You could certainly make the argument of all the sports, for sure the NFL is the hardest one to justify, or in general, you could argue that it doesn't need a lottery compared to the other sports. But look at what's happening. These teams are getting smarter with analytics. They're realizing, what are we playing for? Look at what the Raiders did. Brock Bowers magically, they're going to bench him. Max Crosby was so mad about getting benched, he left the facility. So there's a conversation to be had if it's needed anyway, just for a competitive balance. And on top of that, you've got an incredible event. The NFL markets the schedule drop at this point like an event. I mean, this is an actual event people will tune into. I'd be watching. I don't know how you couldn't be watching. I'd be watching if the Steelers aren't even in it. So I just think it's a no-brainer for me. I just think it takes this week from being relatively flat now to being there's some excitement right in the middle of the break for the Super Bowl.
I think it'd have to be a cut that's lower down than other sports. So like a top 5, top 6. Like I don't think you need a whole top 12,
I agree with
top
that.
13 when it comes to the NFL because it's already competitive more than other leagues. That's the best part about the NFL.
So next up, I've mentioned it a couple of times. I think me and Joe may have some differing opinions when it comes to the, and we'll see, maybe not, but wanted to run through where we really see, we've alluded to this in the past, where we really see the Steelers in the pecking order with the AFC. So Joe, if you want to jump in, if you want to run through the teams, maybe go through your tiers to start. We'll go through each of ours and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'll do mine first. There are 4 tiers here. I only have teams in 3 of them. And that's for a reason. I see the top tiers, the Bills, Patriots, and Chiefs. They have both the quarterback and the organization. Tier 2, which is what I would call the middle of the pack. I think this is squarely where the Steelers are. When you think of the other teams, the Ravens are right next to them. You have the Chargers, Jaguars, Texans, Bengals, Broncos. And then in the tier that's so low, they're not going to be making the playoffs next year. I'm sure one of these teams will and surprise me. And if you look at Justin's list, he'll say it's the Raiders. I don't think so. Colts, Titans, Dolphins, Raiders, Jets, Browns to round out my list.
All right, so don't let Joe talk for me. Don't listen to his takes on my ranking here. But I do think in general, I think we rank them like our tiers are somewhat similar. The first tier, same thought process, the roster, the ownership, and the quarterback, obviously. You got to add the Ravens into that tier, in my opinion.
Why the Ravens? If the Ravens were any good, they would have been good this year. Like, what happened? They had a chance to make the playoffs, beat the Steelers, and they didn't with Lamar Jackson.
If Lamar plays a couple more games or they make a field goal, they're in the playoffs. And this is a down year. I'll meet you there. Let me get through my list first, and then we'll go at it, all right? And I'll put you in your place here, all right? So, first tier, agree with the Bills, Chiefs. Yeah, I mean, the Patriots, I think that's just solely a Drake May thing there, and Vrabel. I mean, he's just there's a gap between these other quarterbacks, and there's value there at his age. I mean, I put them in that tier. I do think they're ahead of schedule. I think they're 1 to 2 years ahead of schedule at this point if you look at their roster. But the value just in Drake May alone, they've got to be in that tier. The next group, similar to your group, I've more or less broken into 2 tiers: the Broncos, Jaguars, Chargers, Texans, and Bengals. This tier is basically, we have the quarterback, but now they could move up. They could easily go on a run, but I think they're either both ownership and or rest of the roster leaves some things to be desired. But like we saw the Broncos this year, I wouldn't shock me at all if any of these teams make a run. They've got the quarterback, they've got some pieces in place, and the roster is good but not great. So that's the next tier. If you don't make the playoffs into these teams, you're very disappointed next year. Now, where we differ, clearly, I broke this tier sort of into 2. My next group is where are we at here? So it's the Colts, Steelers, and this is a last minute change. I did put the Raiders in this tier. So this is basically 2 rosters that are good enough to be in the next tier. They just don't have the answer at quarterback. The Steelers, I've said a lot about where I feel the Steelers roster is. I don't think there's an argument to be made. Clearly, we're about to have it. I don't think there's an argument to be made that you wouldn't trade the entire Steelers roster for any of the rosters in the tier above them. Don't get me wrong. The Steelers could be in the playoffs again with those teams. I don't think they're going to win the division next year. They could absolutely be in that next tier up. Same with the Colts. But they have huge question marks at the quarterback position. The Raiders, I have in this tier. This is probably going to be a little bit hot takey. Their roster, there's giant holes. It is barren on defense. Their offensive line needs overhauled. And I had this debate today. I think you got the 7th most value tied up in the quarterback position right now, and there are some nice players to build around. I think if you pulled NFL GMs, there's a lot of them that would take the Raiders situation over the Steelers situation, which a lot goes into that. But that first pick is very valuable. If you like Mendoza, there are definitely GMs that would take their situation over the Steelers. Again, I think the Steelers and Colts are pretty similar. And then same as you, I do think that next tier, maybe you put the Titans at the top if you really like Cam Ward, Jets, Browns, and Dolphins, despite the fact that the Browns started last year with 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks somehow. You got to put them at the bottom. Same with the Dolphins. The Dolphins and the Jets they are what they are. Ownership is a bigger concern. We're not even including that in this debate, but that's just how I see it. My biggest thing, I thought, okay, maybe I'm being hard on the Steelers. The Steelers had the 11th best odds to go to the Super Bowl next year. So I actually have them right where Vegas has them. And that's just next year. That's not full value of what we're seeing. And I'll take the number 1 pick. So a couple players to maybe build around with the Raiders. They have a couple nice players. I'll take that and the 12th or 13th best odds out of the conference to win the Super Bowl with young players, high-end talent to build around. That's just how I see it.
When you put it that way, it's hard to argue on hey, should I take the 11th best odds to win the Super Bowl and Aaron Rodgers, or the 12th best odds and Fernando Mendoza? I will just say you're absolutely nutty, though, to say the Raiders have the same type of roster as the Steelers right now. The Raiders have the number 1 overall pick, not just because of Geno Smith. It's also because of the rest of their roster.
Agree. I do agree.
Of that nature, but they lost a lot of games last year, and it was because they didn't have a ton of talent.
I don't disagree at all on that. I would move Crosby too. So.
Or a balding tight end, whichever you prefer.
Oh God, here we go. Here we go.
But at the end of the day, though, what I was trying to say with my rankings is that just as it was this year, the AFC and really the NFL is just wide open now. And that's the best part about the NFL. The gap between these teams on a week-to-week basis is so small that really you just got to get hot at the right time and have the right players kind of roll with you, and things can happen. And I still believe that's kind of the way that the Steelers are thinking about things until they land into a quarterback that makes them more legitimate. And that's kind of how they're going to roll. They're not going to give up on a season. I prefer that than not. And with that, I'd rather say the Steelers are right in the mix with the rest of the AFC, which I think they absolutely are, especially if you plug in some type of quarterback. They are not going to go into the next year with Will Howard. I will bet my life on that. It will be someone that's a legitimate, has started NFL games quarterback, and we'll see where it takes us.
So I do want to jump in one. So first off, is Rodgers? It's just Groundhog Day. I said that literally. It's Groundhog Day. Talking about this today, we're just doing the
Groundhog
same
Day
thing. I
with
just
Patrick
don't.
Graham and Mike McCarthy. Like, that is not Groundhog Day. That is coaches that'll bring me to
Uh,
tears when I think about it.
yeah.
So
And one last thing, do you think maybe this year is a little bit of a one-off in it being as wide open with some of the quarterback injuries and just it seems like all the teams that were at the top of quarterbacks had bad years at the same time. I'm not saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you think that there's anything to be said for this year being a little bit of an anomaly?
no, I think that's going to be more of a trend than not for the NFL, and that it just is kind of a wide open game when it comes to it. I think there's just going to be a lot of teams in the middle of the pack, and the season will shuffle it out. The teams that have better quarterbacks will have better odds and a higher stacked deck, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be shuffling out. I have a hard time believing we're going to see a Tom Brady like run with the teams and the way that the league is set up today.
Yeah, again, like we talked about, for me, it just comes down to I'd rather re-roll. I think people think I'm, maybe saying that they need to tank. I'm not saying you don't tank in the NFL. You can't turn over an entire roster quick enough to where tanking truly makes sense. They have some nice pieces. I think they need to rebuild. Is just my take. And this to me, a plus 5,000 odds to win the Super Bowl yesterday. Maybe they should have started a year or two ago. My thoughts on Watt and moving him the last couple of years, if you're aware of them. So to transition over to the Pirates, there was a bit of a back and forth between the GM and Andrew McCutchen this week. So I'll read the quotes here. I want to get Mr. Pirate's take on the back and forth. So Ben Cherington's quote, he was asked about Andrew McCutchen at Pirate Fest, and his response was, part of the great thing about Pittsburgh, all of you baseball fans in Pittsburgh, is how strongly you feel about the people that have meant a lot to the team. Andrew meant a lot to the team. Certainly his legacy as a Pirate is secure. Everybody at the Pirates would desire to have him maintain a good relationship with Andrew well into the future. So that's his, I'll let you comment, but that was his kind of answer without answering on where is McCutchen fit in. Do you want me to jump? Do you want me to read McCutchen's now? So McCutchen's response, this was online. It was a long response, but to kind of paraphrase his quote, I wonder, did the Cards do this with Wainwright, Pujols, Yachty, Dodgers to Kershaw, Tigers to Miggy? This is bigger than baseball. I don't know what the future holds for me at the present moment, but there's more work to do. No matter how hard you try to stamp on me, rip the jersey off me. You don't get to write my future, God does. Rip the jersey off me is an awesome quote, by the way. I love that. So
I love that too. I just was wondering if the inflection of that read was better or worse than the Dr. Seuss read you did for your daughters earlier. But when it comes to the Pirates, though, at the end of the day, I agree with both sides of this coin here. But I think the headline takeaway for me is that there is absolutely room on this roster. It's a 26-man roster now in baseball for an Andrew McCutchen. He would sign for $5 million or less, so he should be on that roster. Even if he only gets 300 at bats a year, you can find a space for him. But at the same time, what Cherington is essentially saying is, we signed McCutchen last year, and really, I don't even think he signed them. I think Nutting told him to sign him the last 2 years. He kind of negotiated with Nutting directly, and Cherington saying this year is, we already have Ryan O'Hearn as our DH. We have Brian Reynolds, who is really slumping defensively and can barely even stay on the field from a defensive metric standpoint when you look at it from that standpoint. So we have two people who are outfielders who really shouldn't be in the outfield. And then now we're going to sign a third and kind of say, hey, Don Kelly, go figure this out with the roster. I think that's why he's pushing back on it. But at the same time, I just want better bats in the lineup. And I think in a day-to-day, when you're building a lineup perspective, it's going to be better with McCutchen in there on some of those off days than not.
Well, and it's not, there's 162 games. Isn't there, there's not room that he's going to play, every 50. You don't need depth. Does depth not matter? I understand the argument you're making, and you explained that well, but we're not building a football team that plays 5 games and you never need to worry about backups here.
It's just who's going to back up in left field and center field when you only have people who can play right field would be the aspect there. Jake Magnum would be that person we're saying, oh, is he going to play left or center? O'Neill Cruz is actually training with Kevin Kiermaier in the offseason, so maybe a gold glove season coming from O'Neill Cruz, so a lot to be excited for there. But at the same time, like, that's why McCutchen is not currently a Pirate. That's why he wasn't a Pirate for Pirate Fest. And really, like, there's still an outstanding question. And I would probably still go McCutchen, but, like, Marcell Ozuna is still out there. So if you're going to take an all-bat person who's going to get mostly DH at bats, is he the better swing and a miss? And along those lines, I think you might get to this, but the fact that the Reds were the ones who locked down Eugenio Suarez for 1 year, $15 million over the Pirates just shows you how hard it is. I think this is what it is. I think it's how hard it is for the Pirates to sign free agents unless they go bananas. Because everything I've read since then is that the Pirates were ready to match that, maybe even go an extra year with a little more cash, and they chose Suarez. Obviously, started his career at the Reds, so he's familiar with them. It's not just the Reds, but it's tough to get people to come to Pittsburgh as the Pirates.
Yeah, and I listened to a little bit or some clips of the podcast AJ Pierzynski's on, and they were talking about it, and it's the non-serious franchise tax. I mean, if you're a player and you have similar offers from two teams, it sounded like the Pirates were even going to go a little bit above, but they made a point that Cherington's maybe he's a little bit used to now that he's finally able to spend some money. Maybe we can debate that, but maybe he just isn't used to. He came from the Red Sox and Toronto. He's used to these big market teams where like you spend money wisely and teams don't go somewhere else when you make a comparable deal. So maybe there's a little bit of that at play here, but again, it's that tax that they have to pay, and they have really no one but themselves to blame the last couple of years. No, on Ozuna, I want to get your thoughts on Ozuna. Does his 25 scare you at all? Like his numbers from last year?
Yeah, of course. But that's why we're talking about him for the Pirates. If he didn't have anything that was scary about him, we wouldn't even talk about him. Like that's just how that works as a Pirates fan. Like you're only gonna get guys with warts and shadows that come into to join your team. You just gotta make sure you do your due diligence. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I'll say it again here, is that the Pirates have not spent money this offseason. That's the narrative that's out there. It's not the case. They're entering this season at the exact same amount in terms of total payroll committed as they were last season. All they're doing is just reallocating where David Bednar and Brian Hayes were on their roster last year. So you're just saying, okay, I'm fine with Gregory Soto and Ryan O'Hearn instead of David Bednar and Brian Hayes. And like I kind of would make that trade, but they're not spending money. So let's just quash that.
Yeah, I think that the numbers are like 3 million less, but when they fill the roster out, to your point, it'll probably be about even. We'll see what they do. So
let's move though from now to the Pens, which is much more exciting from the Pirates because they're actually a good team. We actually opened our podcast saying who is going to be the first franchise in Pittsburgh to win a playoff game. I think we already know the answer. It will be the Penguins. They're going to make the playoffs. And it's the hockey playoffs, so they're going to win a game in the playoffs. They have been 13-2-2 since Christmas. They're on a 6-game winning streak. The game Monday night is on right now. And they are a crazy 10-1-4 against the division. So they're really setting up nicely. And they needed to win a couple of these games going to the Olympic break because the schedule coming outside of it is going to be tough.
Yeah, that was the one thing I do want to caution a little bit is I think they're top 3. And depending on how you break the schedules down, they do have the top 3 or one of the top 3 hardest schedules, as you play out the season. So March is going to be pretty brutal. But again, this run has really set them up nicely in general. So they're in a good spot. We'll see what happens the next couple of days before the Olympic break. And it might be, in a way, it's coming at the wrong time. Another way with that Letang, he broke his foot. There's an aspect to it where maybe it's coming at the right time as well. And, we'll see how they run out. They could easily lose, fade a little bit here right before the break.
This is probably a perfect time aspect when it comes to the Penguins right now, just because of the team that they have. So they're an older team like we talked about. So for them to have an extended break later in the season to then gear up and essentially have like a mini, COVID type season to end it out is perfect.
Right.
Like you mentioned, Letang is hurt right now. Malkin has a shoulder injury right now. They both need that time. They're going to get it. So I'm excited. But one thing that the Pens did honor on these last few games was the 2016 Cup, which was a time for us to go down the memory lane. As you know, we're big into nostalgia. We love talking about old Pittsburgh stuff. And Justin, tell us about what your biggest memories are when it comes to the Pens Cup run.
I did go back and actually watch the 16 DVD and kind of ran back through a lot of stuff I didn't remember. Obviously, some of the stuff, front of mind still even 10 years later. But I think every championship seems to have its own story or theme. I think the big thing, and people may forget about this, the 6 years leading up to that 16 team were pretty dark. They were by far the worst period with Crosby and Malkin. I mean, you had Crosby's injury. You had the back-to-back years losing to the Rangers. They lost to the Flyers in that time period. It was a really, you go from, the 08 and 09 years, and you think this is going to be easy. Then all of a sudden, the Kings and Blackhawks are winning 5 cups over 6 years. And you're like, are we even a top, team of this era? So it was a very, my takeaway or my theme in general, I think, was it was almost like this cup was an exhale. Like, this team is legitimate. This team is what we thought they were, after 09. So that was kind of my theme, or my takeaway in general, I think that fans had for this run. So to go over some of the highlights, Rutherford really emphasized speed and skill in his trade. You even dating back to the summer before with Kessel, and so Kessel, Hagelin, Daly, Cullen, Schultz, and Bonino were some of the big names they moved, and some of those were midseason like a Schultz. But again, it was almost like he was just going all in. He's like, you know what? We're just going to go all in on skill and speed and just see if anyone can compete. So those were those were scattered throughout the year. They started very poorly. I think they started 0-3. Dupuis retired in the middle of this season, which I think a lot of people forget. He is we'll go over this at some point, but definitely a top 3 player, Penguins player for me all time. So seeing him retire.
Dupuis mustard in my childhood bedroom that does not look like the color of mustard anymore. So
yeah,
probably should throw it away.
Yeah, so he retired in the middle of the year. Johnson, a lot of people even forget about Johnson as a coach, came from the minors. He was replaced by Sullivan. We talked about that before, where you get that one, spark, and Sullivan was very aggressive, very forechecking. That was a huge turning point. And he relied on the young guys. He knew the guys from Wilkes-Barre, Rush, Sheary, Murray. They all came up and played enormous parts for this team. 14 of 16 wins to end the season. So they certainly peaked at the right time. You could say, we were just talking about the Penguins, maybe the breaks at a good time. They peaked going into the playoffs. So, and then to the playoffs themselves, I think a lot of people forget Jeff Zatkoff started game 1 and 2 for the Penguins against the Rangers. You have Murray and Fleury, and neither of them could even dress for those first 2 games. They went to Murray in game 3, and they just basically dominated the Rangers. That was the most lopsided 5-game series I think I can imagine. You almost remember it like a sweep. So they went 5 against the Rangers.
If you could, just because he's such a tough goalie, but they just had thrown so many shots on goal. The Rangers didn't.
It was unreal. Yeah, it was unreal. That was also the spring where if you remember him pushing the net, that happened in March before this series. So it didn't get any better once the playoffs started. So then you move to the Cap series. That was an iconic series. Those were the best 3 teams in hockey, clearly, for probably more than a 3-year stretch, but they won the Cup those 3 years.
On the other side in that series?
Yeah. Yep. There were some really tense moments, some suspensions in that series, which was pretty wild. In the Bonino moment, the HBK line in general took off. That HBK line wasn't even formed until March. That was a wild. We'll talk about an iconic moment in Pittsburgh sports. That was a wild way to end a series. Then the Lightning series. I don't think people remember. The Penguins were up 2-0. I think the quote on the DVD was they were playing in the parade. They went down 3-2 in that series. So you think that there's always that one series that goes 7 and a cup run. That was definitely it. They got a fortuitous offsides call when the Lightning went up 1-0 in Game 6 too. So just a wild series in general. Russ became a Pittsburgh hero in Game 7 with his 2 goals. And onto the Cup, they played the Sharks. I mentioned the Sharks. This Sharks team on the last pod, they could be a blueprint for the Penguins this year. Some older names, Marlowe, Pavelski wasn't quite as old. Marlowe, Pavelski, and Thornton were kind of getting towards the end. And this Thornton is very clear was his last shot. But I think they're a blueprint. They had some younger guys that were really stepping up, kind of like the Penguins this year. So that's why I brought them up. But that was a great series too. I think everyone expected it to end in 5, and it was almost ready for Pittsburgh to finally celebrate a championship at home, and it didn't happen that way. But Letang's shift in Game 6 was just incredible, and just such a fun run. I was thinking the other night, I was like, hockey is the only sport where at the end of a playoff run, as a fan, you're like, I'm exhausted. Like, you're up so many late nights, you can't, good luck going to sleep after an overtime game once, whether your team wins or loses. Just such a fun run. It was fun, reliving some of that with the DVD. And I will say, this is my take on that team. I don't want to say this is a hot take. I think that's the best Penguins team of the Crosby era. If not only for the reason that people forget that Letang got hurt the next year. So their playoff team didn't include Letang. That's a huge piece, obviously, at that time. So that's my opinion. I think it's the best team of the Crosby era. So
I'm just laughing at the fact that you keep referencing a DVD. Like, you could just watch YouTube, like and subscribe our podcast.
So I did watch. Right now. So I watched it on YouTube. It was a YouTube video. I do have the Penguins 09 DVD, though, and that's a long story.
But today we wanted to talk about Pitt Panthers that are leaving Pitt to go to professional, Kyle Lewis being the prime one of that, and the Senior Bowl, and really was the talk of the week. I feel like when it comes to the Senior Bowl, the game matters less than the practices, and Kyle Lewis was dominating the practices.
Yeah, he was awesome. I would argue the best. There's definitely some other guys we could talk about, but I would argue the best linebacker at Pitt of the Narduzzi era, which is, Narduzzi certainly cares about the position, so that's saying a lot. I mean, he's so easy to root for, just in general. Again, there's going to be a discussion here around his size. We were at a game, we were at the Central Michigan game. We were talking about it. He's at 224. I think for sure, and Daniel Jeremiah had some really good things to say about him. I mean, everyone was talking about him this week, but at 224, I think he can play outside linebacker. He's going to be a little bit of a tweener in an NFL defense, probably weak side. He'll be in coverage a lot, but in today's game, teams are playing base so less and less every year. You need guys like this, and if he gets in the right system, I think that's the key. Is he has to go to the right place. If he goes to the right system, plays weak side linebacker, and a team knows how to use him, he could. Now Levante David plays more inside, but he could be like a Levante David type player that is a mismatch and a matchup problem for some of these offenses. So I'm just excited to see him do so well. I mean, he was, like you said, he really was one of the probably 5 most talked about guys coming out of the Senior Bowl. That's a big deal. Aaron Donald had his come out, and there's been a lot of guys recently that you have a big Senior Bowl, it could make a big deal. And I'm hearing second day buzz or day 2 buzz from here now, which I was not expecting, when the season ended. So a lot to be excited about.
I would agree with that. And you mentioned Daniel Jeremiah. His quote on Kyle Lewis was, "It felt like every time I looked up, I saw Lewis around the football. He's a playmaker. Now he might lack the prototypical NFL linebacker size that Justin was alluding to, but he'll be a great fit as a wheelbacker, big nickel at the next level. He's excellent in coverage, can fire into gaps, disrupt run plays. I like where Lewis's stock is trending." Daniel Jeremiah is the golden standard, I think, right now when it comes to the scouting world in terms of what you read and content-wise. I love a Todd McShay and things of that nature, but Daniel Jeremiah is the top of the house of that. And him saying those type of words for Kyle Lewis is awesome. Really, Kyle Lewis, when you think of the NFL 15 years ago, might have had a hard time fitting on the field. He does not in today's NFL. He's going to be able to find his helmet and make an impact at the NFL level. And really, I would love to see him in the Steelers. They got some room for him in the secondary / middle linebacker world.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a fit in the 3-4. But again, at the end of the day, if he goes to a team that knows how to use him, I think a team can use him the right way.
The other person from the Senior Bowl that I was excited about, I tweeted out about, I think it's one of our most engaged tweets so far in the early days, is Garrett Nussmeier being the guy for the Steelers. I think he's my early target for my QB dart. I have said earlier in podcasts that I want the Steelers to draft a quarterback every year until they find a quarterback. And I think right now he's the guy. He's got all the tools. He's got the arm. He's got the upbringing, and he looked damn good.
Yeah, I think I could, speaking of Dart, I have written down, I think there could be a Dart-like rise with him. There's a lot of talk, and with these guys, sometimes it's narrative. So the narrative, you can talk yourself into Nussmeier, and I think a team will, because there's a narrative that he was hurt before the season. He had an abdominal injury. He tried to play through it. You can talk yourself into what I saw on tape the years prior, playing against SEC defenses. There's something there. I think I'm not saying he's going to be Dart and go in the first round, but I think he could be a guy that Dart started in the third round, this time last year, and all of a sudden he kept rising, and he went in the first round. I could see that from Nussmeier. I do think he goes day 2 now, and that'll be that same comparable type of a rise, but maybe start from a little further back because of his last year.
And here's the thing with the Steelers is that they have enough picks in rounds 2, 3, and 4 that they shouldn't worry about where they're drafting in rounds 2, 3, and 4, and just get the players that they really want in rounds 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
They don't have to end up with, 6 players?
No,
they end up with 4 that they like and kind of move around a little bit and do the Omar, the con master or the con artist?
The con man. Yeah, the con artist.
Yeah, we'll see what Mike McCarthy's calling Omar Khan after the draft. But, I'm excited when it comes to I always love the draft. It's in Pittsburgh. I think I got to go. I think we got to go.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, though, Garrett Nussmeier, he's a name that I would be excited if Pittsburgh Steelers came right before that.
Yeah, so they almost have to move around. There's a diminishing return on having so many picks. There's only so many slots. You're gonna end up losing some of these guys if you don't move around. So they definitely will. 2 other names I wanted to call out that I think could be a fit with the Steelers, maybe be names to watch, especially in the second round. Jacob Rodriguez at Texas Tech, I think could be. There's a lot of talk around Patrick Queen being on his way out. I think the Steelers can save something like $13 million against the cap. And I'm not making a take on if they should or not, but if they do, that could be a name inside, especially to pair with a Peyton Wilson. The issue at their inside linebacker spot right now is run stopping, and Peyton Wilson's fast enough and he can do some things, coverage and things like that. I think Jacob Rodriguez could be a nice pair with him. And then the other name that and these are guys Daniel Jeremiah, like you mentioned, liked as well. Malachi Fields from Notre Dame. I think he started at Virginia, if I remember correctly, but he's like a 6'4". Steelers haven't had that X. It'd be nice to maybe pair him with DK. Again, another guy, probably a second. These are both second round guys.
He looks slow.
Yeah.
He looks slow.
Yeah. DK is.
We got to double down on wide receiver this year. Take a couple.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Put him at X and don't make DK run these. I think they misused him a little bit. Not that Arthur Smith has ever misused a receiver before, but I do think they misused DK. And some of it, to be fair to Arthur Smith, is who else were you going to use in some of these spots? But I do think if they can get an X type receiver that can beat you down the field, I think DK could be much more. He could be used more correctly with the right combo. So that's another name I would say to keep an eye on as we sit here today, beginning of February.
Oh, I can't wait to get in the draft. So thanks everyone again for sticking with us. If you're still listening, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so now. We'll give you a couple seconds, but otherwise we're going to wrap our show with what we normally do when it comes to our nostalgia moment. Today is our earliest Pittsburgh sports moment. Mine, I was thinking about it. It's definitely, for me, right in that 92, 93 range. So I was born in 87, so that's right around 5. And, I think the one that's clearest to me, and this is random, it's kind of how you'd expect childhood, but it's actually Ulf Samuelsson leaving in free agency. For whatever reason, that was like a jarring moment for me. I'm like, oh, is this the end of the playoff cup fun that was just happening? So that was the one that kind of stuck with me.
That's great. I would have never. That's a good one. And we do. So I'm a year younger than you. So I don't. Some of those early years are a little too blurry for me. Mine is the 95-96 AFC Championship against the Colts. Now this is another one where we were there together watching this one. I do have some memories of the Steelers before that. I remember them playing the Bills a little bit. I remember the Chargers game, but not vividly. So to be fair, I do have some before that. But that AFC Championship game against the Colts when Harbaugh threw the Hail Mary. Looked like it was caught for a second. We did not watch that, if you remember. We ran into another room because we were too nervous to watch it, and we had to go in the other room. I remember watching that with your dad and just being like, we can't take this. We had to go into the other room. So I vividly remember that one, and certainly the Super Bowl. But that's a really fun memory. It's probably the main reason, especially with the championship week just happening. That was my first vivid one.
I believe that. I don't know. I'm right there with you. I remember that. That's a core memory for me too. That Harbaugh pass went up, and we raced back to my bedroom and jumped on the bed and tried to not see what was going on.
Yeah.
And of course, my dad wasn't screaming in the other room one way or the other. But, it was a fun time to see. It's just fun watching your teams go to championship games.
Yeah.
So
there's nothing like it.
That's really what it comes down to. But again, thanks everyone for hanging with us for the episode this week. We're going to be back next Wednesday like always. Like, subscribe, comment. See you next week.
See you later.